today?
Well, remember, they're trying to find out where Little Bad Wolf lives, right?
Yep.
And so, excuse me. And so they did find this beautiful, great big tree, and then they found another tree and they climbed it, and it was almost in Farmer Brown's backyard, and so they just didn't know what they were going to do today, and they had promised to take Patty Pig and Sally Skunk to see this great big weird looking bush tree and to climb in that good tree. So sure enough, excuse me, sure enough, here comes Patty Pig and Sally Skunk. And of course she had to bring Sadie Skunk because her mama was working that day. And Sadie Skunk, you know, was a little teeny tiny thing. So off the boys go, and there was who? Piggly, Wiggly, and Squiggly, and Little Bad Wolf, and Allie the alligator, and the three girls. Well, that was quite a trip. So off down they go to this path that was just a little teeny tiny path, and the girls were going, "Oh my gracious sakes, we've never been here before. Look at the pretty flowers over there, Sadie. Look at the nice grass over there. Wow, we've never seen any of this before." So they got to the great big tree, and they got to this great big bush tree thingy jiggy. I don't know what it was. Nobody knew what it was. So Allie the alligator says, "You know what we should do? We should go on to Farmer Brown's house because we know this path does go to Farmer Brown's, and we should ask Farmer Brown to come and see what he thinks this is." And Little Bad Wolf says, "Oh, let's don't bother Farmer Brown today. I'm sure he's busy today." And Piggly Wiggly and Squiggly says, "No, he's not busy. He's only working in the garden today. Mrs. Farmer Brown said that we're gonna plant the garden today. So let's go. Come on, hurry." And they ran down the path, and Little Bad Wolf is following them in the very last one, and he's just thinking, "Oh, I don't want to go. I don't want to do this." I wonder why Little Bad Wolf didn't want to do this. That was strange. So they got to Mr. Farmer Brown's, and sure enough, he was in the garden with Mrs. Farmer Brown. So they told him what they wanted to do, and he said, "Well, okay." And so he's thinking, and he says, "Okay, come on, let's go." And so they let him down the path, and he's looking around, and he goes, "Well, I didn't know there was a path so close to my farm. This is interesting." And he didn't say anything to anybody else. He just thought that. And they went on down the path, and they came to the big, weird-looking bushy tree, and they came to the big, pretty tree. And he goes, I wonder what kind of bush this is." And do you know what? For all of his knowledge and all of his, he planted trees and bushes, and he had cows and horses and dogs and chickens and rabbits and everything. Do you know he didn't know what kind of tree or what kind of bush that was? And I wonder why. Well, he thought later on. He didn't say anything, and he's thinking. So he says, "Well, boys and girls, I'm sorry, but I just don't know what kind of bush or what kind of tree that is. I've just never seen anything like that before." And Allie the alligator says, "Well, maybe it's a magnolia tree." And Farmer Brown says, "No, magnolia trees, they grow up and they get these beautiful, great big white flowers on them, and they smell good, and I don't think it's a magnolia tree." Well, Allie the alligator says, "I bet I know what it is. It's an old garden that nobody takes care of anymore, and I bet it's got carrots and peas and tomatoes. And Farmer Brown looked at him and he says, now, do you see anything there? Well, no, but I was getting hungry and I kind of thought maybe it might be something to eat. So the three little pigs, they're looking and they're looking and they're looking and they're looking. And Sally and Sadie and Patty, oh my gracious sakes, they're just walking all around it because this is the first time they've seen it. And poor little Sadie couldn't even keep up because her little legs were so little because she was such a little baby girl. And she had to run to keep up with the two big girls. Well, Mr. Farmer Brown says, boys and girls, I think that maybe we should just leave this bushy tree bushy thing. I think maybe we should just leave it here. It might belong to somebody. I think we just need to leave it here. And Allie the alligator says, well, I'd like to tear it down and see what it is. And Little Bad Wolf goes, he got the weirdest look on his little face, and he goes, oh boy. And Piggly Wiggly and Squiggly says, no, let's don't leave it. Let's don't tear it down. Either somebody made it or God blew all the wind and he blew all the stuff together, and look how cool it looks. So let's just don't tear it down, okay? So Mr. Farmer Brown says, well, I'm going to go back home. He said, why don't you boys and girls go down to that great big tree that you said you found and sit up there and read your books. And everybody had brought a book today, even little Sadie Skunk. Even she couldn't read, but she could look at the pictures. That's right, about that big. So Mr. Farmer Brown went back home, and Mrs. Farmer Brown was still working in the garden, and he says, Mrs. Farmer Brown, honey, do you know what I think I found? And she says, Mr. Farmer Brown, darling, what did you find? And he says, well, Mrs. Farmer Brown, honey, I think I found where the Little Bad Wolf lives. Well, she said, really? She says, and where is that? And he goes, well, he said, it's something I've never seen before. It's a whole bunch of twigs and branches and moss and flowers and palmetto fronds and just everything all slumped them together. And it's a great, big, huge, well, like the boy said, a bushy tree. Or a tree bushy.
Or a bush tree.
That's right. So she says, wow. She says, I'd like to go and see that. And he says, well, he said, I think we're safe. We can go right now. It's about 15 minutes down the path. And he said, the boys are off playing in the other tree. So she says, okay. So she says, okay, let's go. So they tiptoed down the path, just in case that the boys were still there. They didn't want to be heard. And they tiptoed down the path. And remember, the path was only this big. So Mrs. Farmer Brown, she went first, and Mr. Farmer Brown, he went behind her to protect her from anything that might jump out, like a snake or anything else. And they got to the bushy tree, or the tree bushy.
Or the tree bush.
Or the tree bush. And she says, you know what? She said, this was either man-made or a little boy made, or God just had a great big wind one day. And he says, yeah, he said, I can't figure out which one it is. So she says, well, I'm not going to try to get in. She says, we're just going to go back to home. So back to the house they went, and they finished up their garden. Well, in the meantime, the boys and girls went to that great big beautiful tree. It was even bigger than the one down by this bushy tree, or the tree bushy. Or the tree bush. And so they were climbing up, and you know what Little Bad Wolf did? He said, little Sadie Pig, he said, you can get in my overalls here, and you can sit there, and I'll climb up the tree, and I'll find a nice little branch for you, and I'll put you on that branch. Isn't that sweet? Because he was going to go to the top of the tree.
Again.
It's a good lookout place to see if anybody's coming. You can see for miles around to see if anybody's coming. So, the alligator, he went up next, and he carried Sally Skunk up, and he put her over here, and here was Sadie. And then he went here to this branch, and Piggly climbed up, and he went to this branch, and Wiggly climbed up, and he went to this branch, and Squiggly, he decided that he would be the guard at the lowest branch to see if anybody was coming down below them. Okay? And you couldn't see, if you looked up in the tree, that was so leafy that, and so many branches that you really couldn't see if you looked up there if there was anybody up there. It was a nice tree. And when you looked down where Squiggly was sitting, nobody could see you, and you could see everybody that would go along that path. But remember, that path didn't look like anybody had used it very often. Little Bad Wolf, he's at the top of the tree where he could see everything for miles around. He could even see, without his binoculars, he could even see Farmer Brown's back pasture. Well, they had a good time. They read their books, and they just were having such a great time. And finally, they got hungry. And Piggly Wiggly and Squiggly says, well, let's run up to my house. My house is the closest. Let's run to my house, and we'll see what Mama Piggy has for lunch today. Well, today was a special day. It happened to be 2 days before Sadie Skunk's 3rd birthday. And Mommy Piggy knew that. So Mommy Piggy fixed hamburgers with lettuce and tomato and onions and avocado slices on top. Oh, I know. Isn't that delicious, delicious? I wish you could see our crew, folks. They're having just great dreams of an avocado and hamburger sandwich. Anyway, so she put a little bit of mustard and a little bit of ketchup on, and then she fed them all. Well, they had potato chips and everything, and go sit down. And so, go sit down. Sorry, folks. So anyway, excuse me. They said, well, what do you want to do this afternoon? And Piggly Wiggly and Squiggly both said, hey, it's too hot to go play. Why don't we go down to the lake and go swimming? So everybody put their little swimsuits on. And you asked me, how did Patty and Sally and Sadie know to bring their swimming suits? Well, it was a well-known fact that you always brought a book, and you always brought a flashlight, and you always brought a little bit of rope, and you always wore your swimsuits underneath your clothes, because you get that many boys and girls playing, and you never know what's going to happen. So they changed into their swimsuits. And Mrs. Piggy says, now, you be careful down at the lake, please. You know how far you can go out. You can go up to your waist. Now, Sally Skunk and Sadie Skunk, your waist isn't quite as big, or, you're not as tall as the rest of the children. So you don't go out very far. Now, you promise you won't go out very far. And Sally, you have to take really good care of Sadie, because she's little itty-bitty tiny. I don't know how come Sadie Skunk was so little when she was 2 years old. But she was just like that big. She just didn't hardly grow. Well, anyway, yeah, about that big. So they go to the lake, and oh, they're having such a good time. Well, I guess this was the rainy season, because here comes the thunder and the lightning, and it started raining again today. Well, in some parts of Florida, it always rained at 4 o'clock. And I guess they were in that part of Florida, because Squiggly looked at his watch, and sure enough, it was 4 o'clock. They all ran home to Mrs. Piggy's house. And boys and girls, we'll have to find out more about this tree bushy, or this bushy tree, on Monday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I love that.